Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
Well, welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast. I'm glad you've joined me. Let me dive right in. I want to hit a topic that is a major trend, a macro trend in our society, particularly in the United States, but that also filters down to something that affects you and affects you economically. Now, everybody's saying that we live in great economic times, particularly here in the United States, and there's no question there's been a strengthening of the economy. But those who watch economies closely and those who know what trends to look for pay attention to the issue of debt. Because debt not only sends signals of what's coming in the economy, but it also is a good warning for the individual. And the fact is that while our economy is strong and we're doing well and many sectors are thriving, both commercial and consumer debt in the United States is in trouble and is sending some very disconcerting signals regarding the health and state of our economy, something we really need to pay attention to. Consider, in the first quarter of this year, delinquency rates on credit cards in the United States were the highest they've been since 2012. That's the better part of a decade now. And they were driven partly by a spike in overdue payments by people ages 18 to 29. By the way, this is from a report by the New York Federal Reserve. And I'm quoting, by the way, from one of my favorite news sources, Axios. I really recommend you pay attention to Axios. They have great programs on HBO, and they put out a great newsletter every day, great update every day. But these statistics are deeply disconcerting. Another one I want you to pay attention to is the U.S. national debt is now $1 trillion higher than the previous record. $1 trillion higher than the previous record. So not only in the first quarter of this past year do we have the highest level of credit card delinquency now, just not new credit card applications, but delinquency, but also the U.S. national debt is $1 trillion higher than the previous record. One expert says that junk bonds are flying out the door again. Deeply indebted companies are borrowing at an even greater rate to pay equity holders. You have this sort of paper tiger, this sort of house of cards of debt that is rising in the U.S. People feel like the economy is strong, and so they tend to borrow more. Companies are borrowing more, but they're also struggling under their enormous debt loads and are actually borrowing to pay their investors and to pay off their debt. So you have a house of cards. You have a dominoes game, basically. One domino falls and other dominoes will fall. And so we're looking at a huge problem of debt. Borrowing has been relatively cheap, but we're starting to see banks tighten their lending standards and raise their rates on commercial loans. They're starting to say, hey, we need to tighten this up. There's too much money out there. We've put out too much money. So this is a problem. Now, I'm not a guy who believes that all consumer debt is wrong. I strongly advocate the views and the teachings and the strategies of Dave Ramsey. He's a friend of mine. I've told you before, I don't have any financial connection to his company at all. But for those of you who are individuals, who are heads of families, who are handling your own debt, if you're in crisis, I strongly suggest Dave Ramsey's material. Get it and do it. I see people set free from their overwhelming debt all the time. But there are two or three things I want to say here. First of all, if this trend continues, it's the kind of force that could bring down or cause a dramatic reduction in the economy. And debt plays another role in that it artificially inflates the numbers that people are reporting. Such and such a company is doing well. What they don't report when they tell you that is that this company just borrowed billions of dollars to pay off its debts or pay its investors or handle its various market concerns. If a company is highly in debt, something that is not often reported, it's a company in danger. And just in the same way that when you're highly in debt, doesn't matter what kind of car you're driving, doesn't matter what kind of house you have, doesn't matter how much you make at your job. You could make $1 million a year. But if you're in $800,000 of debt every year and interest is mounting, you're in trouble. And so all of that to say that we want to pay attention to this trend. We want to realize that borrowing is cheap. And so companies are over borrowing and consumers are going out there in great numbers. And I want to say too, that the age group that is most vulnerable here are basically the millennials, those from about 18 to about their mid 30s to maybe 40. They're the most vulnerable. They're the ones who are having the greatest credit card delinquency. They're the ones who are running up the most debt. Now, part of that is because they're in a stage of life when they're buying cars and they're trying to stretch their dollars to buy houses or to vacations or new families or children and all that. It makes sense to some extent. But we're talking about credit card delinquency here. These are people who have borrowed on a credit card, probably with a high interest rate, and they can't pay it back. And so they are delinquent. And so they're having to pay massive fees. That's dangerous. That's really dangerous. And some of you are in that situation, I imagine, if you're listening to this. Some of you are in that situation, and you need to really pay attention to what can happen. Debt has been the source not only of national economies collapsing, but it is, of course, what causes most individuals to be destroyed. In 2008, when we went through the horrible economic times we did, largely based on real estate inflation and overpricing and various packaging of mortgages and debts and what have you by Wall Street, the debt was the problem. If you were out of debt, if you were flush with cash, if you had no debt, you were fine. You really came through all of that fairly well. The economy suffered. Your industry may have suffered, but you likely didn't get upside down. You likely weren't destroyed. You likely weren't completely damaged or completely ended up bankrupt. But if you were upside down on your mortgage, if you were highly indebted, if you had a house mortgage far larger than you should have had, you probably ended up on the streets. You probably ended up having to move your stuff out. You might have ended up bankrupt. So keep an eye on this. Those of you who watch and analyze the economy, keep an eye on this issue of debt. Both parties, both sides of the political aisle, are treating debt far too lightly. And this president, though he is a business guy, though he is a pro-free market guy, though he's pro-Wall Street and pro-business guy, he's running up massive deficits, which basically are debts, and he is encouraging debt in the private sector, and this is a very dangerous trend. But the trend I'm most concerned about are trends that directly affect you, and many of you are in excessive debt, and you're being encouraged in excessive debt. You were encouraged in excessive debt when it came to student loans. You're encouraged in excessive debt when it comes to buying a car, et cetera, and many of you find yourself tens of thousands of dollars in debt. You lay awake at night and think about it. You need to engage in some radical strategies to get free. Again, though I have no financial connection to the Dave Ramsey organization at all, it's just the best I've seen. And I've seen many, many, many people get out of debt. So this is not a sales job for Dave Ramsey. He doesn't need my help. But my concern is twofold. One is the macro trend of our society, our economy, the U.S. economy, and what that means in the broader world. And second of all, what that means for you. It's a good time to get out of debt. It's a good time to watch this trend. It's a good time to teach your children. And don't just consider your children those who are in your home or under the age of 18. Some of the young ones you have out there tend to run up debt far more readily and get themselves in trouble, and they will be destroyed by it. If you care about your kids, you care about your grandkids, teach them these economic principles. Buy the starter kit, whatever it's called, from the Dave Ramsey organization, or get them some good training, some good teaching, some good material on getting out of debt. I'm not trying to sound some kind of the sky is falling, Chicken Little kind of message here, but the indebtedness of our society as a whole, and particularly consumer debt and credit card debt among those between, let's say, loosely 20 to 40, is at almost a crisis level. And as a nation, we are not just slightly beyond our previous record of indebtedness, we are $1 trillion over our previous record. It's something to watch. It's something to pay attention to. It's something to manage at your own level. Remember that the word economics comes from the Greek word oikonomē, and it means the laws that govern a house, a household. Oiko namas is the simpler way to say it. Oiko is a household, namas is law. So what are the laws? What are the principles? What are the maxims? What are the truths by which you govern your house? Well, one of those ought to be we avoid debt as much as possible. What you want is that compound interest is working in your favor, not working against you. And most people, though they might be doing decently in the salaries they get from their jobs and their benefits, they're losing so much daily when it comes to their debt and the interest on their debt that they are actually sinking, though they might drive a nice car and live in a decent house. And if they were aware of the threat, the burden would probably destroy them. Let's be smarter than this. Let's be smarter as a nation. Let's be smarter as individuals, and let's build economic principles, wise economic principles, into what we do. Again, those of you who work in government and at the national level, work against excessive indebtedness. I know that's a simple thing for me to say and a hard thing to have happen, but let's begin to change the culture there. And for those of you who are at the consumer level, at the family level, I strongly urge, begin to work your way out of debt. And if I can help, I will. That's not what I do, but I'm just saying with book recommendations online or here in this podcast, I can help. And I certainly recommend the material of Dave Ramsey. Let's be wise. Let's be smart. Let's be good economists. Let's run our households and our nation under good economic laws.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator on Fox and CNN. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.